transition stage of that being who began life as God appearing as man, and who is now making ready to complete his earth career as man appearing as God. 7. The 31st year, AD 25. When Jesus returned from the journey to the Caspian Sea, he knew that his world travels were about finished. He made only one more trip outside of Palestine, and that was into Syria. After a brief visit to Capernaum, he went to Nazareth, stopping over a few days to visit. In the middle of April, he left Nazareth for Tyre. From there, he journeyed on north, tarrying for a few days at Sidon, but his destination was Antioch. This is the year of Jesus' solitary wanderings throughout Palestine and Syria. Throughout this year of travel, he was known by various names in different parts of the country: the carpenter of Nazareth, the boat builder of Capernaum, the scribe of Damascus, and the teacher of Alexandria. At Antioch, the Son of Man lived for over 2 months, working, observing, studying, visiting, ministering, and all the while learning how man lives, how he thinks, feels, and reacts to the environment of human existence. For 3 weeks of this period he worked as a tent maker. He remained longer in Antioch than at any other place he visited on this trip. 10 years later, when the Apostle Paul was preaching in Antioch and heard his followers speak of the doctrines of the Damascus scribe, he little knew that his pupils had heard the voice and listened to the teachings of the Master himself. From Antioch, Jesus journeyed south along the coast to Caesarea, where he tarried for a few weeks, continuing down the coast to Joppa. From Joppa he traveled inland to Jamnia, Ashdod, and Gaza. From Gaza he took the inland trail to Beersheba, where he remained for a week. Jesus then started on his final tour as a private individual through the heart of Palestine, going from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north. On this journey northward he stopped at Hebron, Bethlehem, where he saw his birthplace, Jerusalem — he did not visit Bethany — Beeroth, Lebanon, Sychar, Shechem, Samaria, Gibeah, En-Ganim, Endor, Madon. Passing through Magdala and Capernaum, he journeyed on north, and passing east of the waters of Merom, he went by Karata to Dan or Caesarea Philippi. The indwelling thought adjuster now led Jesus to forsake the dwelling places of men, and betake himself up to Mount Hermon, that he might finish his work of mastering his human mind and complete the task of effecting his full consecration to the remainder of his life work on earth. This was one of the most unusual and extraordinary epochs in the Master's earth life on URANTIA. Another and very similar one was the experience he passed through when alone in the hills near Pella, just subsequent to his baptism. This period of isolation on Mount Hermon marked the termination of his purely human career, that is, the technical termination of the mortal bestowal, while the later isolation marked the beginning of the more divine phase of the bestowal. And Jesus lived alone with God for 6 weeks on the slopes of Mount Hermon. 2. The caravan trip to the Caspian. It was the 1st of April, AD 24, when Jesus left Nazareth on a caravan trip to the Caspian Sea region. The caravan, which Jesus joined as its conductor, was going from Jerusalem by way of Damascus and Lake Urmia, through Assyria, Media, and Parthia, to the southeastern Caspian Sea region. It was a full year before he returned from this journey. For Jesus, this caravan trip was another adventure of exploration and personal ministry. He had an interesting experience with his caravan family, passengers, guards, and camel drivers. Scores of men, women, and children residing along the route followed by the caravan lived richer lives as a result of their contact with Jesus, to them, the extraordinary conductor of a commonplace caravan. Not all who enjoyed these occasions of his personal ministry profited thereby, but the vast majority of those who met and talked with him were made better for the remainder of their natural lives. Of all his world travels, this Caspian Sea trip carried Jesus nearest to the Orient and enabled him to gain a better understanding of the Far Eastern peoples. He made intimate and personal contact with every one of the surviving races of URANTIA, excepting the Red. He equally enjoyed his personal ministry to each of these varied races and blended peoples, and all of them were receptive to the living truth which he brought them. The Europeans from the far west and the Asiatics from the far east alike gave attention to his words of hope and eternal life, and were equally influenced by the life of loving service and spiritual ministry which he so graciously lived among them. The caravan trip was successful in every way. This was a most interesting episode in the human life of Jesus, for he functioned during this year in an executive capacity, being responsible for the material entrusted to his charge and for the safe conduct of the travelers making up the caravan party, and he most faithfully, efficiently, and wisely discharged his multiple duties. On the return from the Caspian region, Jesus gave up the direction of the caravan at Lake Urmia, where he tarried for slightly over 2 weeks. He returned as a passenger with a later caravan to Damascus, where the owners of the camels besought him to remain in their service. Declining this offer, he journeyed on with the caravan to Capernaum, arriving the 1st of April, AD 25. No longer did he regard Nazareth as his home. Capernaum had become the home of Jesus, James, Mary, and Ruth. But Jesus never again lived with his family. When in Capernaum, he made his home with the Zebedees. 3. The Urmia Lectures. On the way to the Caspian Sea, Jesus had stopped several